Imagine a smartphone manufacturer sitting in a corporate boardroom and deciding, entirely on purpose, to make their newest device 20% slower than last year's model.
Yeah, I mean,
Over.
on paper, that sounds like absolute corporate suicide.
Right, exactly. Yet, looking at the device we have on the desk today, I'm starting to wonder if it's actually, well, kind of a masterstroke.
It's definitely a massive pivot.
It is. So the question is the brand new Motorola Moto G87 5G the ultimate mid-range champion, perfectly engineered for how we actually live, or does its unbelievably sleek premium hardware hide a hidden fatal flaw that renders it unusable?
It really forces us to confront a reality that the tech industry rarely talks about.
Yeah.
Because for a decade, the smartphone narrative has been this relentless march toward more processing power.
Right. More cores, higher clock speeds, all of that.
Exactly. But the Moto G87 violently rejects that premise. It basically reallocates the budget away from the silicon brain and pours every single cent into sensory input and output, the things you actually touch, see, and hold.
And before we tear into whether that massive gamble actually paid off, I want to welcome everyone back to Azeem USA. We're thrilled you're here with us for this deep dive.
Absolutely.
And if you appreciate these hyper-detailed breakdowns where we go way beyond just reading the spec sheets, you can support the channel directly, drop a super chat down below, leave a super thanks, or join the community as a channel member.
Yeah, that direct support from you is what allows us to keep analyzing this hardware without relying on corporate talking points.
Your support gives us the freedom to really tear these devices apart, sometimes literally, but today, conceptually.
Right, right. Let's stick to the concepts today.
So let's start with the physical hardware, because picking up the Moto G87 creates immediate cognitive dissonance. Like, I knew going in that this is a mid-range phone priced around $470.
Sure.
But just holding it, the tactile feedback tells your brain it's a $1,000 flagship.
Well, the engineering constraints here are fascinating. I mean, we are looking at a 7.3 millimeter profile weighing just 183 grams.
Which is incredibly light.
It is. And usually when you strip weight and thickness down that aggressively in a mid-range device, you end up with a chassis that feels hollow or structurally compromised.
But it might snap in your pocket.
Exactly. The torsion resistance, the bendability of the phone usually suffers big time.
Instead, Motorola went in the total opposite direction. They used this soft-touch silicone polymer faux leather back. Visually, it's just stunning.
Yeah, they partnered with Pantone again for this one.
Right, offering it in this vibrant blue atoll color and a really sophisticated muted bluish gray they're calling Overture.
Right.
But functionally, that silicone polymer isn't just for aesthetics.
No, not at all. It actually solves a major engineering headache, which is shock distribution.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, because the glass back shatters because it transfers kinetic energy instantly upon impact.
Yeah.
But this polymer physically compresses. It absorbs the micro shock waves of a drop before they even hit the motherboard.
Which brings us to the most, I guess, anomalous part of the design. We expect sleek phones to be delicate, but the Moto G87 carries an IP68 and an IP69 rating.
Alongside MIL STD 810H military-grade shock resistance.
Which is wild. Now, anyone who follows tech knows IP68. It means you can drop it in 1.5 meters of fresh water for 30 minutes, and it survives. We've seen that on flagships for years.
It's pretty standard now, yeah.
But IP69, that is incredibly rare on anything that doesn't look like a brightly colored construction brick wrapped in, like, 2 inches of thick rubber.
Oh, for sure. Because the IP69 standard tests against high-pressure, high-temperature water jets.
Right.
The testing protocol actually involves blasting the device with water heated to 80 degrees Celsius. That's about 176 degrees Fahrenheit.
Wow.
And at a pressure of 1450 psi from multiple angles at a distance of just a few inches.
So you could literally leave this phone strapped to the hood of your car while you take it through a high-pressure commercial car wash, and the thermal adhesives and internal gaskets wouldn't breach.
They shouldn't know. I mean, achieving that level of ingress protection in a 7.3 millimeter chassis requires microscopic precision.
The port seals, the adhesive bonding of the display, all of it.
Exactly. When you combine that with the MIL STD 810H certification, which subjects the phone to extreme thermal cycling and repeated drop testing onto solid concrete, you realize Motorola over-engineered the shell to a borderline absurd degree for this price tier.
It fundamentally changes how you interact with the device. You don't need a bulky case. You don't panic when it slips off the arm of the couch.
It's liberating, really.
It is. But that indestructible shell houses a display that feels like it belongs in an entirely different category of electronics. They're calling it a 6.78-inch 1.5K Extreme AMOLED display.
Well, extreme is obviously a marketing term, but the metrics backing it up are completely legitimate. You have 120 hertz refresh rate, which dictates how frequently the screen updates per second, ensuring motion fluidity.
Everything just glides.
Right. But the color science is where we really see the budget being spent.
Yeah.
Because this is a 10-bit color depth panel.
Let's break down the math on that for a second for everyone. The vast majority of mid-range displays use 8-bit color. And an 8-bit panel can display 256 shades of red, 256 shades of green, and 256 of blue.
Correct.
You multiply those, and you get roughly 16.7 million colors. That sounds like a lot, right? Until you take a photo of a sunset and you see those ugly stair-stepping bands of color in the sky.
Banding, yeah.
Because the screen literally cannot render the subtle colors in between.
Exactly. A 10-bit panel jumps from 256 shades per channel to 2024.
Which is massive.
That exponential increase gives you over 1 billion distinct colors. The gradient banding completely vanishes. You get a perfectly seamless transition from the brightest yellow of the sun to the deepest blue of the upper atmosphere.
But the metric that completely stopped me in my tracks, the number I genuinely thought was a typo in the spec sheet, is the peak brightness.
Oh, the 5,000 nits.
Yes, 5,000 nits. To put that in perspective, a high-end flagship from just 3 years ago would celebrate hitting 1,200 nits. 5,000 is blinding.
It is totally blinding indoors, which is why the ambient light sensor will throttle it down to perhaps 400 nits when you're just sitting in your living room.
Okay, good.
Because the physics of pushing 5,000 nits requires driving an immense amount of voltage through the organic light-emitting diodes, which generates rapid heat.
So why include it at all? If you can't use it indoors without searing your retinas or completely overheating the panel, what is the practical application?
It's all about direct, harsh ambient sunlight.
Okay.
The contrast ratio of a screen, its ability to display legible information, collapses when the ambient light hitting the glass is brighter than the light the screen is emitting.
Makes sense.
So if you are standing in a snowy field at high noon or on a white sand beach, the ambient glare acts as a mirror. A 5,000 nit localized peak brightness allows the screen to punch right through that glare.
So you aren't squinting. You aren't cupping your hand over the display to read a map.
Exactly.
And crucially, you aren't guessing when you are framing a photograph. Which brings us perfectly to the camera module. Motorola strapped a 200-megapixel main sensor onto the back of this phone.
Yeah, that's the highest resolution ever placed in their G-series lineup.
By far. But pushing 200 million pixels onto a smartphone-sized sensor introduces severe physical limitations, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. The physical size of each individual pixel has to shrink drastically just to fit on the silicon wafer. Smaller pixels collect fewer photons.
Right. So in broad daylight, that's fine. But in a dimly lit restaurant, tiny pixels result in electrical noise, that grainy, ugly static you see in bad low-light photos.
Exactly. To solve that, Motorola implemented what they're calling 16-in-1 ultra-pixel technology.
I look at this like a rainwater collection system. If you put 200 million microscopic thimbles on your lawn during a light drizzle, none of them will collect enough water to be useful.
And you lose a lot of rain to the plastic rim separating them.
Yes, that's a highly accurate way to visualize it.
The physical barriers between the photodiode wells on a sensor actually block light.
Right. So pixel binning removes the barriers. The sensor groups a 4x4 grid, 16 adjacent pixels, and electronically tells the image signal processor to treat them as one giant superpixel.
You trade resolution for light gathering capability. So you aren't getting a 200 megapixel photo every time. You are getting a hyper-detailed 12.5 megapixel photo with incredibly low visual noise.
And it does this automatically, right?
Yes. The sensor dynamically switches based on the lux levels, the ambient light of your environment.
That's brilliant.
It also leverages that massive pixel count for a 2x lossless zoom. Instead of using a separate lower quality telephoto lens, the software simply crops into the center 50 megapixels of the main sensor.
Oh, because the raw resolution is so high, you don't suffer the digital degradation usually associated with pinching to zoom.
You got it.
Add in the optical image stabilization, or OIS, and we should clarify, this isn't software trying to guess where your hand moved.
No, there are physical micromotors attached to the lens assembly.
Right, gyroscopes detect the millimeter tremors in your hand, and the motors physically shift the lens in the opposite direction in real time.
It's mechanical. And when you pair that with an 8-megapixel ultra-wide and a 32-megapixel selfie camera shooting 2K video, this optics package is absurdly capable for a sub-$500 device.
It really is an exceptional hardware stack. You have a chassis that defies physical destruction, a screen that rivals ultra-premium flagships, and a heavily stabilized high-resolution computational camera.
But
Yes, but
the catch.
this is where we shift tones.
Yeah.
Because you cannot build a phone with these specifications at this price point without a ledger balancing somewhere.
Right. The build materials only stretches so far.
We have to address the fatal flaw we teased in the beginning. We need to talk about the processor bottleneck.
Yeah, so the Moto G87 is powered by a 6-nanometer MediaTek Dimensity 6400 chipset.
Now, Dimensity 6400 sounds incredibly advanced. It sounds fast.
It's a great name.
Right. But when you look at the architectural lineage of the silicon itself, the illusion completely collapses.
It really does. The
Yeah.
Dimensity 6400 relies heavily on Cortex A76 performance cores.
Okay, what does that mean in human years?
Well, the ARM Cortex A76 architecture was announced back in 2018.
Wow.
Yeah. In the semiconductor industry, utilizing an architecture that is 6 years old is practically paleontology.
I want to focus on the generational downgrade here, because this is where users are getting caught off guard. Last year's Moto G86 utilized the Dimensity 7300. By dropping down to the 6400 in this year's G87, synthetic benchmarks and raw compute power have plummeted by 20%.
Some noticeable hit.
Why would a manufacturer accept a 20% performance penalty year over year?
It comes down to IPC, or instructions per clock.
Right.
The older A76 cores physically cannot process as many complex mathematical instructions in a single clock cycle as newer architectures. They run out of cache memory much faster.
So it's a bottleneck.
Completely. Motorola made a calculated financial decision. To afford the 5000 nit panel and that massive 200 MP camera, they had to source a drastically cheaper piece of silicon.
So the inevitable question you have to be asking yourself right now is, does this ruin the phone? Does this 2018 era processor turn this gorgeous piece of hardware into a stuttering, freezing paperweight?
The nuanced reality is that for the vast majority of consumers, it honestly won't feel like a downgrade.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, if you wake up, read the news, scroll through X or Instagram, respond to emails, and watch 4K video on YouTube, the Dimensity 6400 is perfectly adequate.
Okay, so normal, everyday stuff.
Exactly. The Android interface is optimized enough that basic UI navigation remains completely fluid at 120 Hz.
And I'll play devil's advocate here to defend Motorola's choice for a second. This processor basically sips power.
Oh, big time.
When you pair a low-power processor with the massive 5200 milliamp hour battery crammed into this phone, the endurance metrics are staggering. You are getting around 17.5 hours of continuous Wi-Fi web surfing on a single charge.
It is a genuine 2-day phone for light users.
Which is incredible.
That endurance is undeniable. But you are ignoring the ceiling. The moment you push past basic social media scrolling, the facade breaks.
How bad does it get?
Well, if you attempt rapid context switching, say having Google Maps navigating while simultaneously pulling up a heavy PDF in an email and then jumping onto a video calling, the system literally chokes.
Yikes.
Yeah, the older cores just cannot handle the concurrent instruction threads. You will experience dropped frames, noticeable hesitation, and aggressive background app killing.
And if you try to use this phone for modern mobile gaming, the experience basically falls off a cliff. We fired up Wuthering Waves, which is a notoriously demanding, physics-heavy 3D game. What happens when that 2018 architecture tries to render modern particle effects?
The frame pacing completely collapses. I mean, even manually entering the settings and stripping the graphics down to the absolute lowest tier, the frame rates plunged into the single digits during complex combat scenarios.
Unplayable, basically.
Totally unplayable. The processor simply cannot feed geometry data to the GPU fast enough. It becomes a stuttering, nauseating slideshow.
It's like trying to force a massive volume of water through a tiny cocktail straw. The pressure builds up, but the throughput just isn't there.
Great analogy.
And that cost-cutting on the motherboard leaked into the connectivity hardware as well. We need to point out a few minor gripes that act as secondary bottlenecks here.
Yeah, we have to talk about the data and networking pipelines.
Right, because the physical port on the bottom of the device is utilizing the USB Type-C 2.0 standard
which is a severe bottleneck for a device with a 200 megapixel camera.
because of the file sizes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If you shoot a batch of full-resolution RAW photos,
Yeah.
you're dealing with massive files. USB 2.0 has a theoretical maximum transfer rate of 480 megabits per second, but real-world speeds are a fraction of that.
So if you try to offload a gigabyte of photos to your laptop via cable, you will just be sitting there watching a progress bar crawl.
You really will. And the wireless pipeline isn't much better. It only supports the Wi-Fi 5 standard.
Wi-Fi 5 caps out in real-world environments around 250 to 360 megabits per second, right?
Yeah, roughly. Which again, for streaming Netflix, that is perfectly fine.
But if you are downloading a massive 15 gigabyte game file or trying to pull down a large system update,
It lacks the broader bandwidth channels of Wi-Fi 6 or 6E.
yeah.
You were sitting in the slow lane.
Okay, so we have the complete picture here. The unprecedented highs of the build and the display, violently clashing with the architectural realities of the older processor. It's time for the verdict. Is the Motorola Moto G87 sitting at roughly $470 or 389 euros or 419 pounds actually worth your money?
It really demands an honest assessment of your own digital habits.
Let's carve out the profiles. I think this phone is an absolute undeniable triumph for three distinct types of users. First, the media consumer.
Okay.
If your phone is primarily a pocket cinema for YouTube and movies, getting a 1.5K 10-bit 5000 nit display with stereo Dolby Atmos speakers at this price is an absolute steal.
I agree with that.
Second, the industrial or outdoor worker. The IP69 and MIL-FTD 810H durability gives you rugged phone survivability without the humiliating rugged phone bulk.
Spot on. And third, the casual photographer. The 200 MP sensor, paired with genuine optical image stabilization, guarantees excellent point-and-shoot reliability in really tough lighting conditions.
But, and this is a hard, definitive, but if you are a power user who constantly juggles 10 heavy productivity apps, or if mobile gaming is a priority for you, do not buy this phone. The Dimensity 6400 will leave you endlessly frustrated. It is a hard pass.
It really is. Which kind of brings us back to the overarching tension we introduced at the start of this review. The Moto G87 isn't just a smartphone. It feels like a thesis statement from Motorola. And it leaves us with a highly provocative question about the future of consumer tech.
Let's hear it.
Well, are we entering an era where manufacturers have realized we've hit peak performance for the average consumer?
Like a plateau.
Right. Is Motorola deliberately sacrificing raw processing power? Because they have the telemetry data proving that 90% of users only ever scroll feeds, watch videos, and take photos.
So they don't need the speed.
Exactly. Does a benchmark score even matter anymore if the sensory experience, the screen you look at, and the chassis you hold feels like $1,000? Motorola is basically betting their entire mid-range strategy on the assumption that raw speed is dead and the sensory experience is won.
It's a brilliant, highly calculated gamble. They figured out most people only ever drive 25 miles per hour through suburban neighborhoods anyway, so they stopped paying for the V8 engine and spent all the money on leather seats and a killer sound system.
That's it exactly. And the market will ultimately decide if that gamble pays off.
And we will be right here to analyze the fallout when it does. That wraps up our deep dive on the Motorola Moto G87. A massive thank you to everyone for tuning in to Azeem USA.
We truly appreciate you taking the time to explore the engineering with us.
Now, before we sign off, I am hitting you with one final call to action. If you want to keep this channel totally independent, allowing us to rip into these spec sheets and deliver the unvarnished truth, utilize that super chat, drop a super thanks, or join as a channel member.
Your backing is the lifeblood of this content.
It really is. And listen closely. If you listen to this review and realize the Moto G87 perfectly fits your media-heavy, durable lifestyle, make sure to click the Read More link located in the description below for the best deals and latest pricing.
Yeah, those pricing algorithms fluctuate daily, so checking the links ensures you aren't overpaying.
Exactly. Until next time, keep your screens bright, keep your expectations high, and remember, sometimes the smartest engineering decision is knowing exactly what you don't need. Take care, everyone. See you on the next deep dive.